The transport shuttle Meridian docked with the Galactic Military Academy's orbital station with barely a whisper. Through the reinforced viewports, Jake Morrison caught his first glimpse of the massive structure that would be his home for the next 4 years, a gleaming testament to galactic cooperation that housed the finest warriors from across known space. Among the new cadets disembarking were beings that defied imagination. Towering Vorthak warriors moved like living fortresses, their crystalline exoskeletons catching the station's lights in prismatic displays. Nimble Kalari bounded forward on 4 arms with enhanced reflexes that made them blur with motion. The brilliant Nexari glided silently in perfect formation, their telepathic abilities allowing wordless coordination that spoke of hive-mind precision. And then there was Jake Morrison, 5 feet 10 inches of unremarkable human. His brown hair was regulation short, his build neither imposing nor particularly athletic. The standard-issue cadet uniform hung on his frame without the natural authority it seemed to grant his alien classmates. As he struggled with his oversized duffel bag, trying to keep pace with beings who moved with predatory grace, Jake couldn't help but feel like an imposter among legends. A group of Vorthak cadets chittered in amusement nearby, their translator implants rendering their words into standard galactic. "Look at the soft skin," one rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. "Pink flesh, no natural armor, tiny claws that couldn't pierce paper. How did that species ever make it off their mudball planet?" "Perhaps they begged the others for help," suggested another, sending ripples of crystalline laughter through the group. "Or maybe they traded something valuable. What else could creatures like that offer?" Jake pretended not to hear, but his jaw tightened slightly. He'd heard variations of this conversation his entire life on Earth. The whispered doubts about humanity's place among the stars, the questions about what they could possibly contribute to a galaxy full of beings who seemed naturally built for war. Apparently, those doubts would follow him even here. The Academy's main reception hall was a cathedral of steel and starlight, its vaulted ceiling displaying a real-time view of the galaxy beyond. Hundreds of new cadets milled about, their conversations creating a babble of languages that the universal translator struggled to parse. Commander THYSS strode to the center of the hall, her presence commanding instant silence. The veteran Kalari bore scars across her purple-tinged face that spoke of battles fought and won in humanity's darkest nightmares. Her 4 eyes, each capable of independent movement, swept the assembled crowd with predatory assessment. "Welcome to the Galactic Military Academy," she announced, her voice carrying easily through the vast space. "You are here because your worlds believe you represent their finest. Over the next 4 years, we will discover if they were correct." Her gaze lingered momentarily on Jake, and he felt weighed and measured in that instant. "Combat trials begin at dawn. Rest well, you will need it." As the cadets dispersed toward their assigned quarters, Jake found himself walking beside a tall, elegant being whose silver skin was traced with luminous blue markings that pulsed in complex patterns. She moved with fluid grace, and when she spoke, her voice carried the melodic quality of wind chimes. "I am Lyra of the Etherian Collective," she said, offering what might have been a smile. "I find myself curious about human military doctrine. Your species lacks natural weapons, enhanced physical capabilities, or psychic abilities. How exactly do you wage war?" Jake considered the question carefully. Around them, other cadets displayed the traits that had made their species feared across the galaxy. The Vorthak tested their strength against corridor walls, the Kalari practiced combat forms that were poetry in motion, and the Nexari shared thoughts at the speed of light. "We adapt," he said finally, the words simple but carrying weight. Lyra's markings pulsed brighter with interest, but before she could respond, a shadow fell across their path. Crix, the massive Vorthak cadet who had mocked humans earlier, stepped between them. Up close, he was even more intimidating, nearly 8 feet of living crystal and controlled violence. "The human speaks of adaptation," Crix boomed, his voice echoing off the corridor walls like thunder. "Perhaps he means surrender. From what I understand, it is what his species does best when faced with superior force." Jake stopped walking and looked up at the towering alien. Every instinct screamed at him to back down, to avoid confrontation with something that could crush him without effort. Instead, he met Crix's gaze steadily. "Actually," Jake replied, his voice calm despite the adrenaline flooding his system, "we're pretty good at winning wars we shouldn't be able to win. It's kind of our thing." Crix's crystalline plates shifted and rang like bells, the Vorthak equivalent of laughter. "Brave words from soft flesh, little human. We shall see how well your adaptability serves you when the real fighting begins." "We shall see," Jake agreed quietly. As Crix lumbered away, still chuckling, Lyra studied Jake with renewed interest. "You are not what I expected," she observed. Jake shouldered his duffel bag and continued down the corridor toward his quarters. Tomorrow would bring challenges he could barely imagine, tests designed by beings who had perfected warfare before humanity had even discovered fire. "Most people aren't," he replied. "That's usually their first mistake." Dawn came early aboard the Academy station, the artificial lighting cycling through phases that mimicked natural planetary rhythms. Jake had barely slept, his mind racing with anticipation and anxiety about the combat trials ahead. The mess hall buzzed with nervous energy as cadets from dozens of species consumed their preferred nutrients while discussing the day's challenges. The combat simulation chamber was a marvel of holographic technology, its walls lined with projectors capable of creating environments from across the galaxy with perfect fidelity. The air hummed with barely contained energy as sophisticated computers prepared to test the newest generation of galactic warriors. "Today's scenario," announced Instructor Velnock, a scarred veteran whose cybernetic eye glowed with data streams, "hostile boarding action aboard a damaged starship. Your enemy, hegemony pirates using standard military-grade equipment. Mission parameters: secure the bridge and prevent destruction of critical systems." Jake stood in the staging area, methodically checking his standard-issue plasma rifle. The weapon felt alien in his hands, lighter than Earth firearms, with energy readings he was still learning to interpret. Around him, his classmates prepared their species-specific equipment with the confidence of beings born to war. The Vorthak cadets hefted heavy assault cannons that would have required mounted positions for human soldiers. Their crystalline armor gleamed as internal power cores activated, turning each warrior into a mobile fortress. The Kalari moved like dancers, their 4 arms flowing between multiple weapons with hypnotic precision. The Nexari stood in perfect silence, their telepathic coordination eliminating any need for verbal strategy sessions. Cadets Morrison, Crix, Veltar, and Zephyr, Commander THYSS announced, consulting her data pad. "You will function as Team 7. Your objective: reach the bridge through 3 levels of hostile territory and establish control." Jake's assigned teammates regarded him with expressions ranging from skepticism to outright dismissal. Crix towered over him like a living mountain, his massive frame crackling with barely restrained power. Veltar, the Kalari, moved with predatory grace that made Jake's human reflexes seem sluggish by comparison. Zephyr, their Nexari teammate, didn't even acknowledge Jake's existence, his attention focused on establishing mental links with more promising allies. "Try to stay back and avoid getting killed, soft skin," Crix rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. "This requires real warriors." The simulation initialized with a flash of light that left Jake momentarily disoriented. When his vision cleared, they stood within a perfect recreation of a damaged starship corridor. Emergency lighting cast dancing shadows through billowing smoke. Sparks showered from severed power conduits, and the groaning of stressed hull plates suggested imminent structural failure. Almost immediately, hostile contacts materialized, holographic representations of hegemony pirates, their energy weapons already spitting deadly fire toward the insertion point. Crix responded with a thunderous war cry that shook the corridor walls, his assault cannon blazing brilliant streams of destruction. Veltar became a blur of motion, bounding along walls and ceiling with impossible agility, firing from angles that defied conventional tactics. Zephyr coordinated their assault with telepathic precision, his mental commands directing their advance with mechanical efficiency. Jake simply vanished. One moment he stood behind his teammates, the next he had melted into the maze of shadows and smoke that filled the damaged vessel. While his alien classmates engaged in their spectacular frontal assault, a display of raw power and skill that would have dominated any conventional battlefield, Jake moved through the darkness like something that belonged there. His first target never knew death was coming. Jake emerged from behind a collapsed bulkhead, his plasma rifle dialed to minimum power for silent operation. The holographic pirate collapsed without a sound, its elimination registering only as a brief flicker in the simulation's data stream. While Krix's cannon fire and Veltar's acrobatics drew every enemy eye forward, Jake became death incarnate in their rear areas. He moved with mechanical precision, each shot calculated for maximum lethality with minimal energy expenditure. Every technique his father had taught him, patience, observation, the ability to become invisible in plain sight, found perfect application in this alien battlefield. When the simulation terminated, Krix stood triumphant over 5 fallen enemies, his massive chest heaving with combat euphoria. Veltar had claimed 3 kills through spectacular displays of four-armed marksmanship. Zephyr's tactical coordination had been flawless, a textbook example of Nexari military doctrine. The casualty report showed Jake with 12 confirmed eliminations. Impossible, Veltar snarled, his 4 hands tightening on his weapons. How does a soft skin achieve such numbers? Jake methodically safed his rifle, checking the power cell with practiced efficiency. 90% charge remaining, barely touched. You guys made excellent distractions, he said quietly. They were all watching your light show, not the shadows. Commander THYSS studied the simulation data with unreadable expression, her 4 eyes processing information streams that painted a very different picture of human combat potential than anyone had expected. Cadet Morrison, she said finally, report to my office after evening meal. We need to talk. Commander THYSS's office occupied a prime position on the Academy's command deck, its reinforced transparent steel windows offering an unobstructed view of the main training facilities below. Jake watched through the glass as cadets from dozens of species practiced their combat forms, a living gallery of the galaxy's most feared warrior traditions. Vorthak younglings tested their strength against reinforced targets that would have stopped tank rounds, while Kalari bounded through obstacle courses that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Your performance today was unprecedented, Commander THYSS began, her 4 eyes studying Jake with the intensity of a scientist examining a fascinating new specimen. Her scarred hands manipulated a holographic display that showed detailed analysis of the morning simulation. Tell me, Cadet Morrison, what exactly is your combat background? Jake shifted in his chair, acutely aware that he was being evaluated on levels he couldn't fully comprehend. Standard human military training, ma'am. Basic rifle marksmanship, small unit tactics, survival skills. My father served in the colonial marines, he taught me some fundamentals growing up. Did competitive shooting and mixed martial arts through secondary school. THYSS's expression remained neutral, but her primary eyes narrowed slightly. Your father, he fought in the Outer Rim conflicts. Yes, ma'am. 3 tours on hostile worlds before humanity joined the Galactic Council. He said those experiences taught him that survival wasn't about being the strongest or fastest, it was about being the most adaptable. The holographic display shifted, showing a 3-dimensional replay of Jake's movements through the simulated starship. His path through the shadows was highlighted in blue, each elimination marked with tactical analysis data that scrolled past too quickly for Jake to read. You eliminated 12 targets while your teammates engaged 5, THYSS continued, her secondary eyes never leaving the tactical readout. Your ammunition conservation was remarkable, 60% less plasma consumption than our most efficient senior cadets. But what truly intrigues me is this. She isolated a specific moment in the simulation, showing Jake's biometric readings during the most intense combat phase. Heart rate steady. Stress hormones within normal parameters. Brain activity patterns showing analytical thinking rather than fight or flight responses. According to our sensors, your physiological stress levels barely elevated during the entire engagement. Most first-year cadets, regardless of species, show significant combat stress responses. Elevated heart rates, adrenaline spikes, tunnel vision. You remained as calm as if you were taking an academic examination. Jake considered his response carefully. Through the office windows, he could see Crix pummeling a training dummy with enough force to crater stone, while nearby, a group of Nexari moved in perfect synchronization through a complex tactical exercise. My father always said that the best soldiers are the ones who can think clearly when everyone else is panicking, Jake replied finally. He taught me that combat is just problem-solving under pressure. You identify the variables, calculate the most efficient solution, and execute. THYSS leaned back in her chair, all four eyes now focused directly on him. The other instructors believe your performance was anomalous, a fortunate combination of circumstances that favored your particular skill set. They expect your scores to normalize as the training becomes more challenging. And what do you think, ma'am? The Kalari commander was silent for a long moment, her gaze shifting between Jake and the tactical analysis still playing on her screen. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a note of something that might have been concern. I think your species may be far more dangerous than we initially assessed, she said quietly. The galaxy has seen many warrior races, Cadet Morrison. Beings who fight with overwhelming strength, impossible speed, or perfect coordination. But we have never encountered a species that approaches warfare the way humans seem to, not as warriors, but as hunters. Jake felt a chill run down his spine at her words. You are dismissed, Cadet. Tomorrow we test individual marksmanship skills. Try not to surprise me again. As Jake rose to leave, THYSS added one final observation that followed him out of the office and into the corridor beyond. Your father was wise to teach you about adaptation. In the wars to come, that skill may prove more valuable than any amount of raw strength or natural weapons. Walking back through the academy's corridors, Jake passed groups of cadets who fell silent as he approached. Word of his simulation performance had spread faster than a hull breach, and he could feel the weight of their stares, some curious, others skeptical, a few openly hostile. Among them, he spotted Marcus Webb, the senior human cadet, watching him with an expression that mixed pride with something darker. Something that looked uncomfortably like resentment. Jake quickened his pace toward his quarters, already wondering what tomorrow's challenges would bring, and whether his father's lessons would be enough to meet them. The Academy's firing range stretched nearly a kilometer into the station's superstructure, its walls lined with exotic materials capable of absorbing everything from plasma bolts to antimatter bursts. Holographic projectors created environmental conditions that ranged from the crystal-clear atmosphere of a garden world to the swirling dust storms of mining planets, while gravitational field generators could simulate combat on worlds with crushing or negligible gravity. Jake arrived before dawn, seeking solitude to familiarize himself with the Academy's weapons before the day's official assessment. The range was empty except for the soft hum of automated systems and one other figure, Lyra, the Etherean whose silver skin gleamed under the artificial lighting as she practiced with what appeared to be a weapon crafted from pure energy. You rise early, she observed without turning, her luminous markings pulsing in patterns Jake was beginning to recognize as curiosity. Most humans, I am told, require extensive rest periods to function optimally. Couldn't sleep, Jake admitted, selecting a standard plasma rifle from the weapons rack. The familiar weight felt better in his hands than it had yesterday, muscle memory adapting to alien ergonomics. Mind if I use the lane beside you? Of course not. Lyra paused in her practice to watch as Jake systematically examined his weapon, checking the power coupling, testing the sight alignment, ensuring the safety mechanisms responded properly. You handle that with remarkable familiarity for someone of your species' limited military heritage. Jake raised the rifle, settling into a shooting stance his father had drilled into him thousands of times on Earth's training ranges. 500 meters downrange, a target began its randomized movement pattern, weaving through simulated atmospheric distortions that would challenge even experienced marksmen. My father taught me that your weapon should be an extension of your body, Jake said, tracking the target's motion with smooth precision. If you have to think about how to operate it, you're already dead. He fired once. The target's center ring blazed with perfect impact confirmation. Lyra's markings flared brighter, a reaction Jake now understood indicated surprise among her people. Impressive. The gravitational field generators are set to simulate high-gravity world conditions. That target is following an evasive pattern specifically designed to confound standard targeting predictions. Jake fired again, then a third time, each shot finding its mark with mechanical precision. I'm not trying to predict where it's going, he explained, continuing to track the target's erratic movement. I'm calculating where it has to go based on its momentum and the physical laws governing its motion. More cadets began filtering into the range as the station's artificial dawn cycle progressed. Crix arrived with his massive assault cannon, the weapon's power core humming like a barely contained thunderstorm. Veltar brought an array of lighter weapons designed for his four-armed physiology, each one perfectly balanced for his species' unique advantages. The Nexari entered in their typical groups, their telepathic coordination already sharing targeting data before they'd even selected their weapons. Commander THYSS entered with the morning's instruction team, including the legendary Master Gunnery Sergeant Torvan, a grizzled veteran whose reputation preceded him across the galaxy. The old warrior had fought in more conflicts than most species had recorded in their entire military histories, and was said to be capable of hitting targets that others couldn't even see. Today we test precision, accuracy, and adaptability under stress, THYSS announced to the assembled cadets. You will engage targets at ranges from 50 to 2,000 meters, under varying environmental conditions that simulate combat across multiple world types. Your performance will be recorded and ranked against Academy standards. The assessment began with what the instructors considered basic challenges, static targets at moderate range under ideal conditions. For most cadets, these represented reasonable tests of their natural abilities. Crix's massive cannon could punch through heavy armor at impressive distances, his shots thundering across the range like artillery. Veltar's multi-weapon technique allowed him to engage multiple targets simultaneously with breathtaking speed. The Nexari achieved remarkable precision through their shared consciousness, each group member's targeting data combining into a perfect firing solution. Jake simply shot perfectly. As the tests progressed and environmental factors increased in complexity. Atmospheric distortions, gravitational anomalies, moving platforms, and simulated combat stress, other cadets began to show the strain. Scores dropped as fatigue accumulated and alien conditions challenged even enhanced physiologies. Jake's accuracy remained utterly constant. "This is impossible," muttered Instructor Velnock, his cybernetic eye cycling through different analysis modes as he tried to understand what he was witnessing. His species possesses no cybernetic targeting augmentations, no enhanced neural reflexes, no genetic modifications for improved hand-eye coordination. How is he maintaining that level of precision? Master Gunnery Sergeant Torvan had been observing in silence, his 6 compound eyes focused intently on Jake's performance. The legendary marksman's mandibles clicked in what might have been appreciation as Jake completed another perfect score under conditions that would challenge veteran snipers. Finally, Torvan spoke, his voice carrying the authority of decades spent perfecting the art of precision killing. "Cadet Morrison," he called out. "Step forward." The entire range fell silent as Jake approached the Academy's most feared instructor. Even cadets who had been focused on their own assessment stopped to watch, sensing that something significant was about to happen. 2,000 meters, Torvan announced, his 6 eyes never leaving Jake's face. Single target, maximum evasive pattern, heavy atmospheric distortion simulation, and full gravitational variance. One shot. One opportunity. The challenge sent murmurs through the assembled cadets. This was beyond Academy standards, this was a test that even senior instructors found difficult. The simulation chamber had been transformed into something that defied comprehension, a vast, three-dimensional labyrinth that seemed to stretch infinitely in all directions. Multiple levels twisted and intersected in impossible geometries, creating a maze of corridors, platforms, and hiding places that challenged even the most sophisticated spatial reasoning. Automated defense systems lurked in shadowed alcoves, while environmental hazards shifted randomly to keep participants off balance. "Welcome to the Crucible," Master Gunnery Sergeant Torvan announced, his 6 compound eyes reflecting the chamber's ominous lighting. "This is not a test of marksmanship, tactical knowledge, or even combat prowess. This is a test of something far more fundamental, the will to survive when every advantage has been stripped away." 20 cadets stood at the chamber's single entry point, representing the elite performers from all 4 academy years. Jake remained the only first-year student present, and certainly the only human. The others regarded him with expressions ranging from professional curiosity to barely concealed hostility. These were beings who had proven themselves against the galaxy's finest, and Jake's presence felt like an insult to their achievements. "The parameters are elegantly simple," Torvan continued, his mandibles clicking as he gestured toward the holographic displays surrounding them. "You are simultaneously hunters and prey. Each participant begins with 1 weapon and limited ammunition. Additional supplies exist within the maze, but they are well concealed and defended by automated systems that will eliminate the careless or unprepared." A massive holographic timer materialized above the entrance. 4 hours. 4 hours, Torvan stated with finality. The last cadet standing claims victory. Elimination sensors will register all hits and remove the defeated from the exercise. There are no alliances, no mercy, and no second chances. The starting signal triggered immediate chaos. Most cadets charged forward with the aggressive confidence that had brought them this far, seeking strategic positions or racing toward suspected equipment caches. Crix thundered toward the chamber's center, his massive frame carrying enough firepower to hold any position he could claim. A pack of Nexari moved in perfect telepathic coordination, their mental links allowing them to function as a single multi-bodied organism. Several Kalari bounded upward with impossible agility, claiming high ground that would give them commanding fields of fire. Jake observed their dispersal for exactly 30 seconds, then moved in the opposite direction from everyone else. While 20 elite warriors fought for the maze's obvious advantages, Jake discovered something they had missed: maintenance access routes that ran throughout the chamber's infrastructure. These passages were cramped and uncomfortable, designed for automated repair systems rather than living beings. They were also invisible to most participants and provided access to observation points throughout the facility. From his elevated vantage points, Jake became a silent observer to the unfolding battle. He watched Crix establish a defensive stronghold in the maze's central hub, using his superior firepower to dominate a crucial intersection. He observed the Nexari eliminate a group of Chiton warriors who had attempted a coordinated rush, their telepathic coordination proving superior to conventional tactical communication. He noted how Veltar used his forearmed advantage and natural agility to conduct hit-and-run attacks that gradually whittled away at isolated opponents. Jake simply waited. The first hour saw 8 eliminations as the most aggressive participants fell to superior positioning or overwhelming firepower. The second hour claimed 5 more as ammunition began running low and environmental hazards took their toll. By the third hour, desperation had replaced confidence as the remaining 7 cadets realized that victory would require more than raw skill. Jake had not fired a single shot. His patience became a weapon unto itself. While others expended energy, ammunition, and focus on spectacular displays of combat prowess, Jake studied his opponents' patterns, memorized their preferred tactics, and identified their psychological weaknesses. He learned that Crix became frustrated when denied direct confrontation, that the remaining Nexari grew predictable when separated from their telepathic network, and that Veltar's confidence wavered when his speed advantage was neutralized. With 1 hour remaining and only 4 participants left, Jake, Crix, Veltar, and a single Nexari, the final phase began. Jake descended from his hidden observation posts like death incarnate. His first target was the isolated Nexari, whose telepathic abilities had been severed when his teammates fell. Jake appeared behind the alien sniper like a specter emerging from nightmare, eliminating him before the unfortunate being even realized he was no longer alone. 30 minutes remaining. 3 cadets left. Below, Crix had grown increasingly agitated, his thunderous challenges echoing through the maze as he sought enemies who refused to face him directly. Veltar moved with decreasing confidence, his natural speed hampered by exhaustion and the growing realization that conventional tactics were failing. Jake began the endgame. Rather than engaging his remaining opponents directly, he became their shadow, always present at the edge of perception, never quite visible, never offering the direct confrontation they desperately wanted. He moved through the maintenance passages like a ghost, appearing just long enough to take a shot before vanishing again into the maze's hidden infrastructure. Human. Crix's voice boomed with frustration. Show yourself. Face me with honor. Jake remained silent, continuing his psychological warfare. Every few minutes, he would appear at the limits of vision, force his opponents to waste ammunition on shadows, then disappear before they could establish his position. 10 minutes remaining. Both Crix and Veltar had exhausted most of their ammunition chasing phantoms. Their movements had become erratic, driven more by desperation than tactical thinking. Jake tracked them easily through his network of hidden passages, maintaining perfect awareness of their positions while remaining invisible to their increasingly frantic searches. With 60 seconds left on the timer, Jake made his final move. He appeared directly behind Crix in the maze's central chamber, his rifle aimed at the massive Vorthack's unprotected back. Right here, he said quietly. The timer reached 0 with Jake as the sole survivor, standing victorious in a contest where brute force and conventional wisdom had proven inadequate against patience, intelligence, and the uniquely human ability to become exactly what the situation required. In the observation deck above, Master Gunnery Sergeant Torvan turned to Commander THYSS with something approaching awe in his ancient eyes. Perhaps we have fundamentally misunderstood this species. News of Jake's victory in the Crucible spread through the Academy's corridors like wildfire through dry vegetation. Within hours of the simulation's conclusion, every cadet, instructor, maintenance worker, and visiting dignitary knew that the unremarkable human had systematically outmaneuvered some of the galaxy's most promising warriors. The story grew with each telling, how the soft skin had vanished into shadows, how he'd turned the maze itself into a weapon, how he defeated opponents who should have crushed him without breaking a sweat. The reactions varied as dramatically as the species discussing them. Impossible, Crix insisted for the dozenth time, his crystalline plate still flushed with the deep purple that indicated humiliation among his people. The simulation must have malfunctioned. Humans don't possess the neural architecture for such tactical thinking. He must have exploited some flaw in the programming. The Academy's mess hall had become an arena of whispered conversations and furtive glances. Jake sat alone at a corner table, methodically consuming his evening meal while trying to ignore the dozens of eyes tracking his every movement. The food was nutritionally perfect but tasted like recycled air, his appetite had vanished somewhere between the congratulations he didn't want and the challenges he could feel building around him. "May I join you?" Lyra's melodic voice cut through his brooding. The Etherean approached with her characteristic grace, her luminous markings pulsing in patterns Jake had learned indicated genuine curiosity rather than polite social interaction. "Free station," Jake replied, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. Lyra settled herself with fluid elegance, studying him with those large, intelligent eyes. "The Academy is buzzing with theories about your performance today. Some believe you cheated through technological means. Others think you exploited weaknesses in the simulation's programming. A few even suggest that human intelligence has been systematically underestimated by galactic assessments. And what do you think?" "I think," Lyra said carefully, her markings shifting to deeper blues, "that you fought exactly like a predator. Not like the warrior poets of my people, or the honor-bound champions of the Vorthack, or even the telepathically coordinated units of the Nexary. You fought like something that hunts for survival rather than glory." Jake pushed food around his plate, considering her words. "Most species develop combat techniques as extensions of their natural advantages. You're fast and graceful, so you fight with speed and precision. The Vorthak are strong, so they use overwhelming force. The Nexari share thoughts, so they coordinate perfectly. And humans? We don't have any natural advantages, Jake admitted. So we learned to study our enemies until we could predict their weaknesses better than they could exploit our own. Before Lyra could respond, a shadow fell across their table. Marcus Webb approached with a group of senior human cadets, their expressions ranging from disapproval to outright hostility. The mess hall's conversations gradually died as other cadets sensed brewing confrontation. Morrison, Marcus announced, his voice pitched to carry across the suddenly quiet space. Heard you put on quite a show today. Impressive use of unconventional tactics. The emphasis on unconventional carried clear disapproval. Jake looked up at his fellow human, noting the way Marcus's jaw was set, the tension in his shoulders, the careful positioning of his supporters. Just did what the situation required, Jake replied evenly. Marcus leaned forward, placing his hands on the table with deliberate intimidation. See, that's the problem right there. You're making humans look weak. Like we can't win fair fights against real warriors. Like we have to resort to hiding and trickery to compete with superior species. The challenge hung in the air between them like a live explosive. Every being in the mess hall was watching now, sensing that something fundamental was about to be decided. Jake could feel the weight of their expectations, some hoping to see the upstart human brought low, others curious to see if his victories had been flukes. You want a demonstration of human fighting capability, Webb? Jake asked quietly, setting down his utensils with deliberate precision. Marcus straightened, his confidence radiating through the mess hall. I'm thinking a formal challenge. Combat ring, tomorrow after classes. No tricks, no hiding, no environmental advantages. Just two humans settling the question of how Earth's representatives should conduct themselves at this academy. Jake stood slowly, aware that his next words would echo far beyond this moment. Hand-to-hand combat. No weapons, no technological assistance. Winner gets to decide how humans represent themselves here. Marcus grinned, the expression predatory and confident. Now you're talking like a real warrior. Hope you're ready to learn what actual combat looks like, freshman. As the crowd began to disperse, buzzing with excitement about tomorrow's confrontation, Lyra remained at Jake's side. This seems unwise, she observed, her markings shifting to concerned yellows. Marcus Webb is renowned for his physical combat prowess. He possesses significant advantages in size, strength, reach, and formal training. The statistical probability of your victory appears minimal. Jake gathered his meal tray, looking around at the mess hall full of beings who were already placing bets on tomorrow's outcome. Most seemed to favor Marcus by overwhelming margins. Statistics, Jake said quietly, don't account for everything. Lyra tilted her head. Then what gives you confidence in this confrontation? Jake paused at the edge of the mess hall, looking back at the sea of alien faces that would be watching tomorrow's fight. Marcus thinks this is about proving who's the better fighter, he said. But it's not. It's about proving who better understands what fighting actually means. The Academy's main combat ring was packed beyond capacity. Word of the fight had spread throughout the station, drawing not just cadets but instructors, support staff, and even some visiting dignitaries. It wasn't often that two members of the same species faced each other in formal combat, especially humans, the newest and most mysterious addition to the Galactic Military Academy. Jake stood in one corner of the ring, wearing standard Academy training gear. Across from him, Marcus Webb looked every inch the superior fighter, taller, more muscular, moving with the confidence of someone who had never lost a hand-to-hand combat in his life. Master Gunnery Sergeant Torvan served as referee, his 6 eyes taking in both fighters. This is a formal challenge under Academy regulations. Victory by submission, unconsciousness, or surrender. Lethal techniques are forbidden. Do both combatants understand? Understood, Marcus replied, rolling his shoulders. Understood, Jake said quietly. In the crowd, Commander THYSS leaned over to another instructor. What do you make of this? Webb should win easily, came the reply. He's bigger, stronger, more experienced. The Morrison boy is good with weapons and tactics, but this is about raw combat skill. THYSS wasn't so sure. She'd been watching Jake Morrison for weeks now, and she'd learned not to underestimate the deceptively average-looking human. Begin. Torvan barked. Marcus came out aggressively, using his reach and strength advantage to pressure Jake immediately. His first combination was textbook perfect, a feint high followed by a body shot that should have folded his smaller opponent. Jake wasn't there. He'd slipped the punch by inches, just enough to avoid the impact while staying close enough to counter. His response wasn't flashy or powerful, just a precise strike to Marcus's ribs that made the bigger man grunt and step back. Stand still and fight. Marcus snarled, pressing forward again. But Jake refused to fight Marcus's fight. Where Marcus was aggressive, Jake was elusive. Where Marcus relied on power, Jake used precision. Every exchange followed the same pattern. Marcus would attack with technically perfect combinations, and Jake would slip away at the last second, leaving behind a counterstrike that found its mark. It was frustrating to watch, at least for those who expected a traditional brawl. Marcus landed harder shots when he connected, but Jake connected more often. Gradually, the accumulated damage began to show. This is not how humans should fight, growled one of the Vorthak observers. Where is the honor in this? Lyra, standing nearby, turned to the massive alien. Where is the honor in losing? By the third round, Marcus's frustration was evident. His combinations had become wilder, more desperate. He was chasing Jake around the ring, burning energy while his opponent seemed as fresh as when the fight began. Fight me! Marcus roared, throwing a haymaker that would have ended the contest if it had connected. Jake ducked under the punch, stepped inside Marcus's guard, and delivered a series of quick strikes to pressure points along his opponent's arm and shoulder. Marcus's left arm went momentarily numb. I am fighting you, Jake replied calmly. You're just not winning. The crowd had grown quiet, sensing that something unexpected was happening. This wasn't the dominant performance they'd expected from Marcus Webb. This was something else entirely, a systematic dismantling by someone who understood exactly what he was doing. In the final round, Marcus threw everything he had left into one last desperate assault. For 30 seconds, he unleashed every technique he'd learned in his years at the academy, trying to overwhelm Jake through sheer volume of attacks. Jake rode out the storm like he'd ridden out everything else, patiently, precisely, waiting for the right moment. When Marcus finally exhausted himself, Jake struck. It wasn't dramatic. There were no spectacular techniques or devastating power shots. Jake simply stepped in, applied a textbook chokehold, and waited for Marcus to tap out. Submission, Torvan announced. Winner, Morrison. The crowd erupted, but not in the way anyone had expected. There were no cheers or jeers, just a stunned silence as beings from across the galaxy tried to process what they'd witnessed. Jake helped Marcus to his feet, earning a grudging nod of respect from his defeated opponent. I don't understand, Marcus admitted, still catching his breath. You never trained for this. Your file says you had basic martial arts experience, nothing serious. Jake considered his answer carefully, aware that hundreds of beings were listening. I didn't train to fight you, Webb. I trained to fight anyone. My father always said that in real combat, you don't get to choose your opponents or the conditions. You adapt to what you face, or you die. Commander THYSS made her way through the crowd to the ring. Cadet Morrison, report to my office in 1 hour. As the crowd dispersed, Jake found himself surrounded by his fellow cadets, not just humans, but aliens who had previously dismissed or ignored him. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to respect to something approaching awe. How? Asked Crix, his crystalline plates reflecting the arena lights. How does your species fight like that? Jake looked around at the assembled beings, warriors from dozens of worlds, each representing the finest their civilizations had to offer. "We don't fight like anything," he said finally. "We fight like whatever we need to be to win." Epilogue. 3 years later, Lieutenant Jake Morrison graduated first in his class from the Galactic Military Academy. His record included not just his unprecedented first-year performance, but continued excellence in every form of combat training the Academy could devise. He was assigned to the Elite Rapid Response Corps, where his unconventional tactics and ability to adapt to any situation made him one of the most effective officers in the galaxy. And whenever new cadets arrived at the Academy, especially human cadets, they heard the story of the soft skin who had outfought, outthought, and outlasted beings who should have been his superiors in every way. They learned that sometimes, the most dangerous warrior isn't the strongest or the fastest or the most well-armed. Sometimes, it's the one who refuses to fight fair.